Today we're talking about Füri knives, F-U-R-I, Füri knives, and specifically today the 8-inch chef knife. Welcome to a Chef Knife Co. knife review. So Füri is an Australian brand founded by Mark Henry, who is an entrepreneur, inventor, and an engineer with knife materials science honours. So not an old maker in the world of knives, reasonably new, 1996, but they've certainly made a bit of a name for themselves, especially in the Australian market. So the first impressions. So it's an Australian knife design, knife maker, but it's got a very European, almost industrial design look. This handle is kind of a Philippe Starck sort of look to it. First impressions, it's much heavier than I thought it was going to be. I thought maybe the handle would be a thin steel hollow handle. I think it's probably still hollow, but it's quite thick steel. I reckon the thickness of the spine here probably runs through the thickness of the handle. So it comes in at a whopping 277 grams, which when you compare that to say, some of the 8.5, 9-inch chef knives that come in 250 grams, or just a Gyuto 6-7 inch, which is coming in at 150 grams, very small. This is a 277 gram knife, so it's really very heavy in your hand. But that said, picking it up, the first impressions are of quality make because of the weight, and it just doesn't feel tinny or flimsy in any way. So the overall style and design. So the blade itself is quite traditional chef's knife, Western chef knife. So we got a reasonably flat spine actually, dropping down just towards the end, but the edge is quite a nice sweep up. It's not too belly heavy, it's not too flat, it's got a really nice shape to it, quite traditional. It's certainly nothing drastic, nothing that would make you have to cut in a particular way. You can use a whole bunch of different cut styles with a knife like this. The handle itself, as I said, is kind of a strange shape, but I do quite like the way it looks and feels, and the balance itself is bang on. I can't actually balance it because it's right in between this part, and obviously that's on a bit of a rise, so nicely balanced. What would you use this knife for? As with any other chef's knife, it's very much an all-rounder. Apart from detailed work, it's too big to be detailed, and this is too heavy. You can use some chef's knives, the lighter chef's knives, on some detailed work, but this thing is pretty heavy. So it's great, obviously, for a lot of hard work, getting through things, because the weight of it's going to help with that. Not so great for a lot of work. So if you're really getting through a mountain of vegetables, it's going to get a bit tiring in your hand because it is so heavy. But that can be a benefit if you're just doing a small amount of solid style stuff. The overall feel in the hand is actually really nice. So even though it's quite specific where you need to put your fingers, in a full grip, I'm getting some nice curve where my index finger is, but then if you want to choke up on it, that curve appears on that finger, the middle finger. So it works for both. So it works for a full grip and it works when you're choking up. And the fact that this little bit is hanging out the end doesn't get in the way. It's not too back heavy. And when you're in a full grip like this, really trying to get through something, that little bit doesn't get in the way either. It's big enough, unless you've got some real pudgy mitts, it's not going to get in the way at all. Because the blade is quite a nice, long, arcing edge, it's really good for rocking cuts. Obviously, very good for rocking cuts. It's also pretty good for push cuts, although if you are push cutting and you're ending up towards the tip, you might not get through something that's quite flat, because there's no real flat point on this. So push cuts they'll work nicely, but you might not get through everything. Pull cuts, not so much with this. It just doesn't feel right. I think it's the ergonomics of the handle, which I don't know, it just doesn't seem like you'd be doing a lot of pull cuts with this particular knife. But for the rock cuts and the push cuts, it's really quite nice. So let's go ahead and actually cut something. I've given this a sharpen. As I said, this is not a brand new knife out of the box. It's been around a while, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because I mean it's held up remarkably. But I went ahead and sharpened it on the belt grinder, as well as gave it some go over on the whetstones. So it cuts really well. Let's try giving some of these things a cut. Right, so first a lime from our garden out here. So we'll get a wedge. Very nice. Smooth. It's a really smooth blade to cut with, and certainly doesn't have any problem getting through it. It's just really nice. Push cut like that, just delightful. All right, so rock cuts, as I said, that's just it's fantastic. It's very easy to use. If you were going to be doing push cuts, just gets through it easily. Does some rocking, switching between the two. So that's very nice. Let's try a carrot. Obviously a rock cut is very nice. Oh, it just slices straight through. And to be honest, I did sharpen it, but I didn't sharpen it to a razor edge. Now let's have a look. The weight really helps. So the weight of this, especially through something like a carrot, really helps it get through without having to, really push into it. So let's have a look how it deals with this. Super easy. Look, I'm really quite impressed with this Füri knife. It's really doing a great job, and the heaviness helps you. It doesn't hinder you in tasks like this. It's just fantastic. That's one thing it's not so great at. Really fine work. The tip is just a bit too thick to really do some nice fine work. So that's what I said at the start. Not great for fine work. You would use a smaller or thinner knife for that. But this, in terms of getting through a lot of heavy stuff, I mean, even cutting things finely, works an absolute treat. As long as you're not using the tip. It's just not quite right for tip work, this knife. Generally, my overall impressions of this, it's a solid knife. It really is a very nice knife to use. Just a bit heavy for me. And personally, I think the design for the handle is trying to be a bit too clever, but that's just an aesthetic thing. It's not a comfort thing. It's a very comfortable handle. For me, it's just the look of it is trying to be a bit too clever, but that's personal choice entirely. Yeah, I mean, it's a well-designed knife. It's a Japanese stainless steel made in Australia, and at a price that's actually pretty reasonable, to be honest. So would I recommend them? Yeah, I would. I think it's a really great chef's knife. Unless, of course, you're trying to get through mountains of stuff, it's a bit too heavy for that. But all in all, the Füri knife, highly recommend it.